lost track of his wife. So he stopped a very attractive woman, and she said to her, "Young lady, would you talk to me for a while?" And she said, "Why?" And he said, "Well, whenever I lose my wife, as soon as I start talking to a pretty lady, she appears out of nowhere." Well, something appears out of nowhere in today's gospel, too. This gospel happens right after the rich man came to Jesus and wanted to follow him, but was unwilling and unable to give all the riches that he had. So Peter asked, "What do we receive who have given up everything to follow you?" And Jesus told them, "There's no one who's given up brothers or sisters, mother or father, children, lands, everything for my sake, who will not receive 100 times more in this world and 100-fold in the world to come." But then suddenly out of nowhere comes this word, "and persecutions." Persecutions? Where did that come from? Well, those who study the Gospels say that when Mark wrote his Gospel, handing on the traditions that he had received from mouth to mouth and putting them down in writing, he was incorporating the experience of his church. When Jesus said the words originally, he was telling of all the promises, the wonderful things that would happen. But Mark's church was also experiencing something else, and that was persecutions. And that's why this word appears. It's the experience of the church of Mark when he wrote his gospel, that being persecuted was almost part of being a Christian. Well, things have not changed much now, 2,000 years later. We are still persecuted as a church throughout the world, but we were especially persecuted in the lands like Iraq and Syria, especially when ISIS had control there and killed many Christians, beheading them, burned many churches. And the church there is still suffering. And I think that in our own day, especially after the clergy sexual abuses, we too have suffered persecutions. A couple of our churches have been burned by arsonists, you may remember, St. John's in Hacienda Heights and the San Gabriel Mission just about a year ago. So if we are experiencing difficulties, opposition, maybe even some persecution for living and practicing our faith, we should not be surprised. It's not something that happened suddenly in this Gospel of Mark. It was part of their experience, and it is part of the church's experience today. But remember also, Jesus promised that 100-fold, and as we will be nourished in this gospel, Jesus also promised the last will be first.